I've been asked to describe myself as a survivor. My therapist uses the word. The journalist who found me 2 years after used it in her piece. I didn't read the piece. People described it to me, thinking I'd want to know. The word implies something was survived. That part is accurate. It also implies the person who came out the other side is the same person who went in. That part is not. I want to be precise about that distinction. Precision is the only thing I have left that feels like honesty. My name is Kara. I was 23. I played bass in a band called Dirt Floor. Nobody outside a 4-state radius had heard of us. We were fine with that. Or I was fine with it. That's not exactly the same thing. But it was close enough that I never examined the difference. We played for gas money and floor space, and the occasional hot meal from someone's mother who felt sorry for us. Danny played guitar and thought we were 6 months from a record deal. Trick played drums and thought Danny was an idiot. I played bass and thought both of them were probably right. Reed sang. I'm going to come back to Reed. The venue was 2 hours outside Portland. I've never been able to satisfactorily explain the direction to anyone who asks. There were no landmarks I recognized. The roads we took were the kind that don't appear on maps civilians use. We'd been booked by a promoter we'd never worked with before, a soft-voiced man named Garvey. He called Danny's cell and offered a flat rate 3 times what we usually made. Danny accepted without asking questions a smarter person would have asked. I'm not reconstructing this in hindsight to seem prescient. I remember thinking at the time that the rate was too good. I remember thinking it and filing it away under the category of good fortune that doesn't require examination. That is a category I no longer maintain. The bar was called something in German that none of us could pronounce. The parking lot had trucks with specific bumper stickers. The crowd had specific tattoos. None of this was subtle. In the years since, people have asked me why we didn't simply turn around. I'll tell you why. We needed the money. We were 23 and 25 and 24. Reed was 26. When you are those ages and those amounts of broke, the part of your brain that evaluates threat is subordinate to the part that calculates rent. That's not naivety. That's economics. I want that on record. We played the set. The crowd was hostile in the specific way of crowds who want to see if you'll flinch. We didn't flinch. By the end there was something close to respect in the room. The grudging, conditional respect of people who have decided you're acceptable for tonight. I remember details from that set that I have no use for and cannot stop retaining. The smell of the room, beer and pine resin, and something underneath both of those things, something older. The way the lights at the front of the stage turned the first row of faces into masks. A man near the back who didn't move for the entire set. He stood with his arms at his sides and watched us. His attention was patient and measuring, the attention of someone doing an assessment rather than attending a show. I noticed him the way you notice peripheral wrongness without naming it. I've named it since. I've named it many times. We finished. We started breaking down. Then Danny went back to the green room to get his jacket. He found something he wasn't supposed to find. He came back with a face I had never seen on him, and have never seen on anyone since. It was not quite fear. Fear implies uncertainty about what's coming. This was a face that understood exactly what was coming. It had no room left in it for anything except that knowledge. He told us. We locked the door. I'm going to tell you what happened in that room over the next 4 hours. I'm going to tell it accurately. That means telling it in a way that makes me look like things I have spent years deciding whether I am. There were 4 of us. Danny, Trick, Reed, and me. There was one door. It locked from the inside. They were on the other side of it. There were more of them than there were of us. They had things we did not have. They had made a phone call we didn't know about yet. That phone call had set a clock running that we couldn't see. Danny took charge in the first 20 minutes. I let him. Danny taking charge was a known quantity, a reliable pattern. In the first 20 minutes I needed patterns more than I needed accuracy. He talked to the man on the other side of the door. He tried to negotiate. He used the word witnesses. I remember thinking that was a mistake. Not because it wasn't true, because it framed us as a problem to be managed rather than people to be reasoned with. You cannot reason with something that has already decided you're a problem. The man on the other side of the door was calm. That was the thing nobody tells you. Every version of this kind of story you've absorbed from films and television has prepared you for rage, for the specific operatic menace of a person who wants to hurt you and is enjoying the wanting. What you are not prepared for is calm, patient, administrative calm, the voice of a man scheduling an appointment. I have tried to explain this to people who weren't there. I can see in their faces the moment they stop believing me. It's easier to believe in monsters than in the particular horror of a man who views you as a logistical inconvenience. The first hour we looked for another way out and didn't find one. The second hour Reed found a box cutter under the equipment rack. He held it the way a person holds something they've never held before, which is to say incorrectly. I want to stop here and tell you something about Reed that matters. Reed was the best of us. I mean this in the specific, unsentimental way of someone who has had years to audit the statement for accuracy and found it holds. He was the best musician by a margin significant enough to make you wonder why he was playing basement joints in the Pacific Northwest instead of something larger. He was the best person. The quality of attention he gave to other people was not performed. It was not the charity of someone who wanted to be seen giving. It was the real thing, the kind that costs you. The kind you give anyway. He had driven 4 hours in February to help me move apartments. He said nothing about it then or ever. He had a sister in Spokane, a dog named after a musician I'd never heard of. He hummed while he worked. I'd found it annoying for 2 years. I would give a great deal to hear it now. He was holding the box cutter incorrectly. I want you to hold that image because I'm going to come back to it. The third hour is where I have to be most precise. Precision here requires me to tell you that I had been watching Trick for 40 minutes before I understood what I was watching. Trick had his phone out. He had lost cell signal. We all had. But he had his phone out, and he was doing something on it. He was angling the screen away from the rest of us. I noticed this the way you notice peripheral things in a crisis. Not immediately, not directly. In the accumulated way of small wrongnesses that eventually break the surface. I moved to sit next to him. He tilted the phone further. I put my hand on his arm, gently, the way you touch someone you need something from. He showed me the screen. He had found a signal, a single bar, intermittent, flickering in and out. He had been sending a text for the last 40 minutes. The text said, sending one out alone through the back. Keep them busy, the one in the gray jacket. Then a description of Reed. Height, hair, the gray jacket he'd worn since Illinois. I read it twice. I read it the way you read something that requires 2 passes before the language resolves into meaning. Trick's eyes when he looked at me were not apologetic. They were the eyes of a man who has made a calculation and is waiting to see if you'll argue with the math. There were 4 of us. They would take us all eventually. One of us going out through the back might buy the other's time. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The arithmetic was simple. I understood it. The fact that I understood it is one of the things I've spent years deciding whether makes me complicit in what happened next. I looked at Reed. He was by the door, still holding the box cutter incorrectly, talking to Danny in a low voice. He turned and saw me looking. He gave me the small nod he gave when he was checking if I was all right. The nod that was a question without making you answer if you didn't want to. The nod I had been receiving for 2 years without fully appreciating. I looked back at Trick. I did not take the phone away from him. I want to be precise about this. I did not help him. I did not confirm. I did not nod. I did not indicate consent in any way I can identify in memory. I looked at him, and I looked at the phone, and I looked at Reed, and I did not take the phone away. Make of that what you will. I've made of it everything I can reach, and I'm still not at the bottom of it. What happened next happened in a compressed way that memory has never successfully slowed to real time. Danny said something about a plan. Trick said something about the back door. Reed said he would go first because he was the fastest. That was not true. I was the fastest. Reed knew I was the fastest. The only reason to say it was the reason Reed would have for saying anything. To put himself between whatever was coming and the rest of us. I said his name. He looked at me. I said his name again. I didn't say anything after it. There was nothing after it that wouldn't have required me to say what I knew. Saying what I knew would have required me to explain how I knew it. I could not do both of those things and still be someone I recognized. He went out through the back. I heard it. I won't describe what I heard. I will tell you that it was fast. That is the only mercy in the account. What I will describe is the 12 seconds after, the specific quality of the silence that followed. Not empty silence. The silence of a space where something has just been removed from the world. The silence that has a shape to it. A before and an after with nothing bridging them. I stood in it. I was aware of Danny against the wall. Trick was already moving toward the utility panel. I was aware of my own breathing, my own heartbeat. The box cutter on the floor where Reed had set it down before he went out. I was aware that I had said his name twice, that I had not said the thing that needed to be said, that the window for saying it had closed and would not open again. 12 seconds. I've counted them many times. They take much longer in the counting than they did in the living. Afterward, the sound of it continued in my head for 18 months without interruption. It continues now at a lower volume, like a radio in another room that no one has turned off. Here is what I did in the 40 minutes after Reed went out through the back. Danny fell apart, not dramatically. He came apart the way competent people come apart, quietly and completely. The useful parts of him went offline one by one. He sat against the wall and stopped being able to make decisions that required more than one step. Trick did not fall apart. Trick was functional. He had made the largest decision available to him. He was now operating on the other side of it with the hollow efficiency of a completed transaction. He found a second exit we had missed. A utility panel in the back wall, low, covering a crawl space that connected to the building's maintenance corridor. He had been looking for it the entire time. He had been looking for it as the route he planned to use once Reed had done what Trick had sent him out to do. I want to be honest about what I felt toward Trick in that moment. Honest and accurate. Those two things are in tension here. What I felt was not righteous. It was not the clean anger of someone who loved Reed and was holding that love up against what Trick had done. What I felt was more complicated and less forgivable than that. It was the specific cold recognition of someone who had been shown the arithmetic, had understood it, and had not taken the phone away. I was angry at him for doing what I had permitted. That's what I've come to. Years of auditing, and that's the bottom of it. We went through the crawl space, the three of us. In a different story, in the story where I am who I thought I was at 23, I do something different in the seconds before we go in. I say something. I don't go. I refuse the crawl space and what it represents and what it costs to get there. I went through the crawl space. The maintenance corridor led out behind the building, in the trees, far enough from the parking lot that we could move without being seen. We moved. I won't recount the specifics. The specifics are not the point. The details of the escape, the cold, the dark, the road we found after 20 minutes, the truck that stopped, the hours before we reached anything that felt like safety, are the most documented part of this account. You can find them elsewhere if you want them. What I want to tell you is what happened when we reached the road. Trick walked ahead. He had a direction, a certainty of movement that neither Danny nor I had. Danny was following him with the automatic compliance of someone who has outsourced all decisions. I walked behind them. I looked at the back of Trick's head. I had a thought that I have not told my therapist or the journalist or anyone who has asked me about that night. I had the thought, and I didn't act on it. I have spent years examining that inaction with exactly the same scrutiny I applied to the other inaction, the one with the phone. I have reached the same inconclusive bottom both times. I don't know what I am on the other side of that room. I've tried the available options. Survivor doesn't fit for the reasons I described. Victim fits some of it but leaves out the parts that don't. Guilty is too clean. It implies a verdict. It implies the process completed. The process has not completed. What I know is this. I play bass in a different band now. I live in a city I didn't live in before. I have a dog. I sleep in increments. I keep the radio on. I have not driven on a road I didn't recognize in 4 years. I have a therapist who uses a word for me that doesn't fit. I don't correct her. The word she uses is kinder than the ones I use for myself. Danny doesn't return my calls. He hasn't since the first year. I understand this. I think I would make the same choice in his position. Trick I have not seen. Trick I do not look for. Trick is a door I have closed and locked from the inside. I have no intention of opening it to see what's on the other side. Reed had a sister in Spokane. Her name is Margaret. She called me once, 8 months after. I answered because I thought I owed her the answering. She asked me what happened in that room. I told her what I could. That was not all of it. There was a long silence after I finished the version I could give her. Not hostile silence. The silence of someone sitting with something they've been handed and deciding how to hold it. She said she'd been told different things by different people. None of the versions felt complete. I said I understood that. She said she thought about him every day. I said I did too. That was true. I said I was sorry. That was also true. It was also not sufficient. We both understood it was not sufficient. It was what I had. She asked if he was scared. I told her no. That was the only lie in the account. I told it because some things are more important than precision. The only kindness I had left to give Reed was the lie, small and warm, that he went out through that door without knowing what was waiting. He knew. He knew and he went anyway, because that was who he was, and because I did not take the phone away. I think about the box cutter, the way he held it, the specific incorrectness of the grip, the way you hold something you've never held before, the particular quality of bravery that looks like it from the outside, going toward the thing you're holding it wrong for, going anyway, because someone has to and he decided it would be him. That image lives in a room in my head. I return to it more often than is useful and less often than I deserve. The dog's name is Reed. I named him before I understood why, then I understood why. I kept the name anyway. Every morning he puts his head in my lap. He looks up at me with the uncomplicated love of something that doesn't know what I am. I put my hand on his head. I sit with that for as long as I can. It is never as long as I need. That's the whole of it. That's what was survived.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.